Hi everybody, this is Toffee bringing you Chapter 1, Part 1 of my Fire Emblem 4 LTC. Starting Chapter 1, our units begin the map inside the home castle where they can use the various facilities without using up their turn. Past LTCs typically would not upload these segments, and for good reason, but I figured I could be a bit thorough and show you everything. The next video will be the actual Chapter 1 clear. There is an armory that sells certain weapons, and in the first one we can buy a steel axe for Lex, a slim sword for Arden, an iron lance for Nisha, and a javelin that Quan will take. Quan himself sells his javelin to Finn, who will be putting kills on it. Sigurd will also eventually hand off his steel sword and iron lance to Alec. Slim swords are actually stronger and lighter than irons in this game, and the slim sword will help Arden to get through the arena. The arena is one of the most time-consuming parts of an FE4 run, but it is of critical importance. Each chapter has a predefined sequence of 7 enemies that each unit can fight in the arena, which happens in a special terrain that gives both sides 20 extra avoid, and the payouts linearly increase from 1000 to 4000 gold. At any time you can yield, but unlike other entries, if a unit loses they do not die and instead are kicked out with 1 HP. Arena enemies are basically auto-level generics, optionally carrying a ring. There are 2 exceptions, one of which I'll address in a bit, and the other will be in Chapter 2. While follow-up is of course useful in the arena, a lot of units live and die by their proc skills here. Since a unit only has to beat each opponent once, and on player phase to boot, we can and will rig all manner of unlikely fights and level ups to muscle through, with proc skills serving as a crutch to help units deal with the nastier enemies. Units with higher attack speed go first in the arena, with speed dice always resolving in the player's favor. I didn't really talk about it in the prologue, but weapon weights in this game are typically set for a category of weapon. Swords typically weigh 3, lances 12, axes 18, bows 8, and fire magic weighs 12. The number crunchers among you may notice that Midir's first arena opponent seems unusually accurate and dodgy, given he's using a hand axe, a weapon that has 50 innate hit and 20 weight. This is due to a bug in how the game handles bow users. Bow users face a slightly different arena track, but the game seems to erroneously use some of the stats from the one range track here. Here, Gazak's hand axe has the correct might you would expect, but has the hit and weight of the iron axe he would use in the melee track. This usually nerfs bow users, since 1 to 2 range weapons are typically heavier and less accurate than 1 range weapons, and in particular, it makes the final fight of this arena much more stringent for Midir. Some bow enemies that are different classes from their melee counterparts reuse the same stats as their melee counterparts as well. Midir actually won't finish his final arena fight until later in the chapter. The prologue clear was designed to grab as many beneficial level ups as possible in order to help units muscle through the Chapter 1 arena, which is probably the hardest one in the game relative to the actual stats of our units. Fights 1, 2, and 3 are generally reasonable for most of our units to deal with, but Fight 4 is the first time we fight a Myrmidon, and they are nasty enemies to face at this point. While arena enemies lack personal skills, they do have class skills, and Myrmidons have follow-up as a class skill, meaning most of our units will just get doubled by them, especially with an incorrect weapon choice. Something you'll see me doing is pausing a battle before the final blow, before resuming, even if I don't change the weapon being used, for fights that end in one of my units leveling up. I think I forget to do it for one of Ethelin's fights here, but otherwise I stick to it until the end of the run. The reason is to be sure of circumventing a glitch in the unpatched version of the game, where units that participate in prolonged arena fights end up not gaining stats on level up, even if they had a greater than 100% growth, such as Sigurd or Quan in HP. I don't think any of the fights in Chapter 1 would trigger it, but I was being abundantly cautious. Pausing and resuming the fight before the last round is supposed to resolve the problem. Generally, units want to gain HP, defense, speed, and their primary attacking stat as much as they can, as most of the enemies they face are going to be physical enemies. Arden typically skips out on speed, but we do want him to gain 1 point of speed to let him trick his way past the final fight in this arena with the help of the slim sword. You can alternately have him muscle through with the steel sword, which does have some advantages, but I like the trick in question, and Chapter 1 is the one time I get to show it off. Sigurd and Quan have little trouble getting through arenas, but other units have various problems. Ethelyn with her dinky slim sword is quite weak, which will cause her problems versus the armor and the general. The silver sword Sigurd received in prologue is a solution to this. Ethelyn has minor balder blood, which gives her an A rank in swords, letting her use it to punch through those enemies before we've gotten a chance to rig a lot of strength level ups on her. Arden is slow, meaning he's easy to outspeed, but the slim sword is just enough extra might to let him get faster kills on some enemies, and it also will let him get past fight 7 in the next video, with a trick that Alec and Nisha will also use for that fight, that I'll dub the Chalfie Juggle. Since you can change arena weapons after every round of combat and the RN string is fixed, Alec and Nisha can sometimes be in a position where they outspeed an opponent with a sword and are outsped with a lance. By switching between them accordingly, they have twice as many ways to get good RN strings to get through fights. Nisha can otherwise just crit his way past fights, and he doesn't really need all that many speed level ups since he doesn't have follow-up. I mentioned last time that Onslaught has a flaw, and it is that it is a proc skill that is completely useless in the arena, since the arena can effectively generate infinite rounds of combat, which overrides Onslaught entirely. Alec only has follow-up, and his strength starts off a little lower, which means he has to brute force his way through his fights. Fight 6 in the arena is another difficult one because wind magic is a very light weapon, and the fight is with a high level mage who also carries a speed ring to boot, making it very likely for him to outspeed our units and get the first hit in. Alec does miss an HP level up at one point, and this actually comes back to bite me later in chapter 3. Finn, in principle, can cheese any arena fight with Miracle if you micromanage his level ups enough, but we actually want to pump his stats up for map work, so we just brute force him through as well. Lex grows HP, strength, and defense easily, especially with Paragon, so the arena normally isn't that hard for him, with the exception of sword users. FE4's weapon triangle is worth 20 hit and avoid. The arena already gives 20 avoid. Swords are the most accurate, and axes are the least accurate of the triangle as is, meaning that swords versus axes heavily favors swords. There is a weapon in chapter 1 that you would think would help Lex do better in the arena, but we're forced to skip it in an LTC. Azel is the legendarily terrible at base anima mage, and like his buddy Lex, has bad matchups against sword users, especially Myrmidons, though he will ultimately be a bit more salvageable. Right now, Azel only has fire, his base stats weren't great to boot, meaning he will have extreme difficulty getting past fight 4, so we will only have him beat the first 3 fights in this segment, and we'll want to get him some map EXP before he takes on the rest. And finally, there's Midir. Bows have the hit rate of axes, making Midir's arena combat a bit shakier. He also tends to be negatively impacted by the bow track glitch I mentioned earlier, especially with Fight 7 of this chapter, which has 2 more enemy AS than you'd think due to using the Steel Blade's weight instead of the Steel Bow. In future chapters, I typically postpone as much inventory management as possible to the main chapter clears instead of the arena segments, but I was still figuring things out at this stage. You'll see Lex being sent into the arena to die a lot here against Fight 7. The only way we have to burn RNs is to have units enter fruitless rounds of combat in the arena. Due to Vantage, Lex ends up burning 2 to 3 RNs per round. RN burning as such is much slower than in say GBA and is often more imprecise. I'll drop off here, see you next time for chapter 1.